Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Elevation. Here we go. No matter how much you eat, yes, Scott said. And what if it continues? It won't. How can you be so sure? If it's outside of human experience. To this, Dr. Bob had no answer. Keep your mouth shut about this, Bob, please. I will, if you promise to keep me informed. I'm concerned. That I can do. On the stoop, they stood side by side, looking at the day. It was a nice one. Foliage was nearing peak, and the hills were burning with colors, moving from the sublime to the ridiculous. Dr. Bob said, "How are you doing with the restaurant ladies up the street from you? Heard you were having some problems there." Scott didn't bother asking Ellis where he had heard this. Castle Rock was a small town, and word got around. It got around faster, he supposed. When the retired doctor's wife was on all sorts of town and church committees. If Mrs. McCobb and Mrs. McDonald heard you calling them ladies, you'd be in their black books. And given my current problem, they're not even on my radar. An hour later, Scott sat in his own study, part of a handsome three-decker on Castle View above the town proper. A presere address that he had been comfortable with, but Nora had wanted it, and he had wanted Nora. Now she was in Arizona, and she was left with a place that had been too big even when it had been the two of them, plus the cat, of course. He had an idea she had found it harder to leave Bill than to leave him. Scott recognized that was a little bitchy, but how often the truth was. In the center of his computer screen, in big letters, were the words Hark Shield Cork Draft Site for Material. Hark Shield Cork wasn't the chain he was working for. Had been out of business for nearly 40 years. But with a job as big as this one, it didn't hurt to be mindful of hackers, hence the pseudonym. When Scott double-clicked, a picture of an old-timey Harkschild Kong department store appeared, eventually to be replaced by a much more modern building belonging to an actual company that had hired him. Below this, you bring the inspiration, we bring the rest. It was this tossed off tagline that had actually gotten him the job. Design skills were one thing, inspiration and clever sloganeering was another. It's a very interesting word, sloganeering. When they came together, they had something special. He was special. This was his chance to prove it, and he intended to. Make the most of it. Eventually, he would be working with an ad agency, he understood that, and they would tinker with his lines in graphics. But he thought that slogan would stay. Most of his basic ideas would also stay. They were strong enough to survive a bunch of New York City hotshots. He double-clicked again, and the living room appeared on the screen. It was totally empty. There weren't even light fixtures. Outside the window was a greensward that just happened to be part of the Highland Acres golf course, where Myra Ellis had played many rounds. On a few occasions, Myra's foursome had included Scott's own ex-wife, who was now living and presumably golfing in Flagstaff. Bill the cat came in, gave a sleepy meow, and rubbed along his leg. "Food soon," Scott murmured. "Few more minutes." As though a cat had any concept of minutes in particular, or time in general. As if I do, Scott thought. Time is invisible, unlike weight. Ah, but maybe that wasn't true. You could feel weight, yes. When you were carrying too much, it made you ploddy. But Wasn't it like time basically just a human construct? Hands on a clock, numbers on a bathroom scale weren't the only ways of trying to measure invisible forces that had visible effects. A feeble effort to corral some greater reality between mere humans thought as a reality. Let it go, you'll drive yourself bullshit. Bug shit. Bill gave another meow. Scott returned his attention to the computer screen. Above the barren living room was a search field containing the word "pick your style." Scott typed in early American and the screen came to life. Not all at once, but slowly, as if each page of furniture were being picked out by a careful shopper and added to the whole. Chairs, a sofa, pink walls. They were stenciled rather than papered. A set Thomas clock, a good wife rag on the floor, a fireplace with a small cozy blaze within. The overhead fixture held hurricane lamps on wooden spokes. Those were a little over the top for Scott's taste. But the salespeople he was dealing with loved them and assured Scott that potential customers would too. He could swipe and furnish a parlor, a bedroom, a study, all in early American. Or he could return to the search field and furnish those virtual reality rooms in colonial, garrison, craftsman, or cottage style. Today's job, however, was Queen Anne. Scott opened his laptop and began picking out display furniture. 45 minutes later, Bill was back, rubbing and meowing more intensely. Okay, Scott said and got up. He went into the kitchen, Bill the cat leading the way with his tail up. It was as if feline spring in Bill's step, and Scott was damned if he didn't feel pretty springy himself. He dumped Friskies into Bill's bowl, and while the cat chowed down, he went out on front porch for a breath of fresh air before going back to Selby Wing's chairs. Winfrey, Seddies, who's high boys, all with the famous Queen Anne legs. I have no idea what this all is. He thought it was the kind of furniture you saw in funeral parlors. Heavy shit trying to seem light, but different strokes for different folks. He was in times to see the ladies, as Dr. Bob had called them, coming out of their driveway and turning into View Drive, long legs flashing beneath tiny shorts. Blue for Deirdre McCobe, red for Missy Donaldson. They were wearing identical t-shirts, advertising the restaurant they ran downtown on Carbine Street. Following them were their nearly identical boxers, Dum and Dee. What Dr. Bob had said as Scott was leaving, probably wanting no more than to end their meeting on a lighter note, now recurred. Something about Scott having a little trouble with the restaurant ladies, which he was. Not a bitter relationship problem or a mysterious weight loss problem, more like a cold sore that wouldn't go away. Deirdre was the really annoying one, always with her faintly superior smile, the one that seems to say, "Lord, help me to bear these fools." Scott made a sudden decision and hustled back to his study, taking a nimble leap over Bill, who was reclining in the hall, and grabbed his tablet. Running back to the porch, he opened the camera app. The porch was screened, which made him hard to see, and the women weren't paying any attention to him anyway. They ran along the packed dirt shoulder on the far side of the drive with their bright white sneakers scissoring and their ponytails swinging. The dogs, stocky but still young and plenty Atlantic, pounded along behind. Scott had visited their homes twice on the subject of those dogs, had spoken to Deirdre both times, and had borne their faintly superior smile patiently as she told him she was really doubted that their dogs were doing their business on his lawn. Their backyards were fenced, she said, and in the hour or so each day when they were out, Dee and Dum always accompany Missy and me on our daily runs. They were very well behaved. I think they must smell my cat, Scott had said. It's a tutorial thing, I get that, and I understand you're not wanting to leash them when you run, but I appreciate you checking out my lawn when you come back, and polishing it up if necessary. Polishing, Deirdre has said, her smile never wavering. Seems a bit militaristic, but maybe that's just me. Whatever you want to call it. Mr. Carey, dogs may be, as you say, doing their business on your lawn, but they're not our dogs. Perhaps it's something else that's concerning you? It wouldn't be a prejudice against same-sex marriage, would it? Scott had almost laughed, which would have been bad, even Trumpian diplomacy. Not at all. It's prejudice against not wanting to step in the surprise package left by one of your boxers. Good discussion, she had said, still with that smile not maddening, as she might have hoped, but definitely irritating, and closed the door gently but firmly in his face. With this mysterious weight loss the farthest thing from his mind, was the first time in days Scott watched the two women running towards him with their dogs loping gamely along in their wake. Deirdre and Missy were talking as they ran, laughing about something. Their flushed cheeks shone with sweat and good health. The McCobb woman was clearly the better runner of the two, and just as clearly holding back a bit to stay with her partner. They were paying zero attention to the dogs, which was hardly neglect. Few Drive wasn't a hotbed of traffic, especially in the middle of the day, and Scott had to admit that the dogs were good about keeping off the road. In fact, at least they were well trained. Not going to happen today, he thought. It never does when you're prepared, yet it would be pleasant to wipe that little quirk of a smile off Mrs. McCobb. But it did happen. First one of the boxers swerved, then the other one followed. Dee and Dum ran onto Scott's lawn and squatted side by side. Scott raised his tablet and snapped three quick photos. Sorry. That evening, after an early supper of spaghetti carbonara, followed by a wedge of chocolate cheesecake, Scott got his Osary scale, hoping, as he always did these days, that things would finally start going the right way. They had not. In spite of the big meal he had just put away, the Osary informed him that he was down to 210.8 pounds, or 210.8 pounds. Bill was watching him from the closed toilet seat, his tail curled neatly around his paws. Well, Scott told him, it is what it is, right? As Nora used to say when she came home from those meetings of hers. Life is what we make it, and acceptance is the key to all our affairs. Bill yawned. But we also change the things we can, don't we? You hold the fort, I'm going to pay a visit. And with this, I'm going to stop it for this book reading. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.